Last night at UFC Noche, Merab Dvalishvili brutally exposed Sean O'Malley in the main event and became the new UFC bantamweight champion. And the crazy thing about all of this is we should have all seen it coming a mile away. Going into this fight for months and, speculating about this fight, even after O'Malley, right after he defeated Aljamain Sterling, for the longest time, I was like, you know what? I think Merab is going to ragdoll him. You look back at the Piotr Jan fight, and then you look, I know MMA math doesn't always work, but you still have to kind of look at these fights to give educated guesses. And we're going to go through Sean O'Malley's resume because, this whole entire fight now just brings more clarity to Sean O'Malley's resume than ever before. But going into this fight, I changed my prediction to Sean O'Malley. And fair enough, I watched fight footage. I'm like, you know what? He's getting clipped by Henry Cejudo talking about Merab. He's getting clipped by Marlon Moraes. Sean O'Malley has really good footwork, really good lateral movement. And Merab's there to be hit. And so I picked Sean O'Malley. And I said, you know what? Sean O'Malley has kind of proven himself. You look what he did to Aljamain Sterling. But when you look back and you really break down his kind of resume over the last couple years, the UFC's kind of been assisting Sean O'Malley. And now all of a sudden, let me get to this actually, and that's the reason. One of the reasons I wore this shirt is for the longest time, I was called one of the biggest Sean O'Malley haters ever, just for expressing my opinion that he wasn't that good and hadn't proven anything. Then he starts to prove a little bit, and I start to praise him a little bit, and I say, look, Sean O'Malley, this is his coming out party at the Sphere, or at Sphere as the UFC. That was aggravating as hell. But I start to let you guys know, look, I've seen this a million times. And with a performance here from Sean O'Malley against Merab, let's say he gets a viral KO, I think he transcends into, not a Conor McGregor level star, but like an Israel Adesanya level star within the UFC because there were so many eyeballs on this event. And all of a sudden I get called, you're an O'Malley fanboy and this and that. Listen, for the longest time I wasn't a believer in Sean O'Malley. For the longest time I said, look, Sean O'Malley's got a lot to prove. And I think I was swindled a little bit by the Aljamain Sterling performance. He went out there and finished Aljamain Sterling, even though it was a bit of an early stoppage. And, I'm looking at these fights, and I'm like, you know what? No matter what, I had such a low kind of, skill level ascribed to Sean O'Malley. When I'm seeing some of these performances, I feel like I went the opposite way and thinking, maybe he's way better than I thought. And I still think Sean O'Malley's good. Don't get me wrong. But his grappling got brutally exposed here. And the reason I want to cover this is because what happens is, and we've seen this, over the history of the sport, when you have a really good striker and they're never even out-grappled, what you have is people saying, oh, their weaknesses is the grappling. Their weakness is the grappling. All you got to do is get them against a good wrestler. That's been going on for the history of the sport when you have a really good striker. And then sometimes it never even happens. But on Saturday night, it happened for Sean O'Malley. And you go back and you look through his resume, and now it's like, you know what? He was massively overrated. I overrated him, and I was the king of underrating him for a long time. And let me just say this before we get into kind of the deep dive of his resume, and I want to talk about the fight in itself a little bit. I did a detailed breakdown of this fight. If you want to go check it out, I'll link it down in the description, like talking about it, like strike by strike and round by round, but I'm not going to get into that here. But I want to say this. Sean O'Malley's still a good fighter, but he has massive holes in his game. And I don't know, honestly, if he'll ever be UFC bantamweight champion again. Maybe he will. Maybe he won't. I doubt that he will, to be quite honest, when I'm looking at the division right now, because he has glaring holes in his grappling game. And we should have all seen it coming into this fight. But you go back and you look at his resume, and this is the crazy part. And I was saying this for so long. But then I started to, you know what, this win over Aljamain Sterling, you can't deny it, regardless of the circumstances. Even though I made a whole video about how the UFC stacked the deck against Aljamain Sterling and, gaslit him into taking a fight under less than ideal circumstances, which I believe they're going to do the same thing to Merab. We'll talk about that towards the end of this video. But you look at his resume, listen, and nobody's covered this more than me. Basically, he fought scrub after scrub after scrub until he fought Marlon Chito Vera at UFC 252. And at UFC 252, he got exposed badly there. He got his legs brutally chopped. He got shucked to the ground. And then he got flash KO'd with brutal ground and pound elbows And then he was stretchered out of the cage with no serious injury, okay? And everyone called that a fluke, and I said, look, that's not a fluke. He got brutally KO'd in the first round. Fight was competitive up until that point. And then afterwards, after that fight, he gets fed basically scrub after scrub after scrub. Thomas Almeida, Chris Montino. They had Luis Smoke at one point, but it got canceled. Raulian Paiva. And I'll never forget, and if you follow my channel, you can go back and find me talking about this. What the UFC will do, and a lot of fan bases will go along with it as well, and basically the MMA community will do the same thing because they listen to everything Dana White and the UFC says. What they'll do is they'll book a fighter they have high hopes for against maybe a tiny bit of a step up, and then they'll hype that fighter up so that way when the fighter that they really want to promote wins, they can act like it's a better win than it actually is. And that's what happened against Raulian Paiva. He went out there, KO'd Raulian Paiva in the first round, looked good doing it, and they act like Raulian Paiva was so great, even though Raulian Paiva was basically a literal scrub. Then he fights Pedro Munoz, okay? The biggest test of his career. And Pedro Munoz wins the first round. Second round gets eye poked by Sean O'Malley. And then Sean O'Malley in his corner act like, oh yeah, Pedro won it out because he was losing. Which is craziness and delusional. And I'm wondering if they honestly believe that, okay? But instead of rematching Pedro Munoz, he gets that Dagestani privilege and gets a jump up against Petr Yan at UFC 280, the Charles Oliveira Islam Makhachev card. And he beats Petr Yan on the scorecards, which if you followed my channel for any amount of time, you know that I think that's a brutal robbery. I thought Petr Yan won 30-27. I did not think this fight was debatable. I did not think in any realm Sean O'Malley won this fight. He got outstruck, he got rocked, he got out-grappled, and I thought he clearly lost to Petr Yan. And I think he knows he lost. I think Tim Welch knows that he lost, and somehow he gets the decision. And then he gets to sit out for almost a year waiting on Aljamain Sterling. And what they do is they book Aljamain Sterling against Henry Cejudo in May of 2023, and then they basically announce it the night of the fight. After Aljo beats Henry Cejudo, they make him turn around and fight Sean O'Malley in August. Basically, immediately jumping back into camp, immediate quick turnaround when Aljamain Sterling cuts a decent amount of weight to give Sean O'Malley the most optimal set of circumstances to win the fight. I've covered this extensively. I'll link that video down in the description as well, which is crazy because we have some behind-the-scenes footage of them gaslighting Aljamain Sterling, literally Hunter Campbell gaslighting Aljo into taking the fight, even though he shouldn't have. And then what happens at that fight? Sean O'Malley goes out there, he circles, he keeps at range, and he finishes Aljamain Sterling. And in the course of the fight, he stuffs off a couple takedowns. I think 2 takedowns throughout the 2 rounds that the fight went on for. And after that fight, I'm like, you know what? I knew going into it, Aljamain Sterling was, forced into this fight. I knew it was less than optimal circumstances for him, but you still have to respect that. And I still think Sean O'Malley's a top-level bantamweight fighter, but you have to look back on that and you're like, you know what? Maybe Aljamain Sterling gets it done. Honestly, looking back now, if you book that rematch, I'm picking Aljamain Sterling. I picked him the first time. I picked Aljo to win that fight the first time. I was wrong. I'm picking Aljamain Sterling. And then, and this is one of the main reasons I was going to pick Merab for the longest time, instead of fighting Merab, they do everything in their power to twist themselves into pretzels. And I'm talking about, Dana White and the UFC and Sean O'Malley, to not give Merab the title shot. They're like, oh, well, he turned down a title fight against Aljo and la la la, which isn't true. Was never available to him. And they give him Marlon Vera off the back of a 1-fight win streak, split decision win over Pedro Munoz. He goes out there, beats Marlon Vera. Everyone acts like, yeah, he proved the first fight was a fluke, even though the 2 fights were 4 years apart. And we don't act like fighters get better or worse, where I think Marlon Vera was the better fighter in 2020. Obviously, he KO'd him. And I think he never really improved that much, where Sean O'Malley, I believe, is so young and improving vastly. And he went out there and defended his title, but it was a free title defense. Everyone knew going in that fight it was a free title defense. But then they were like, okay, we've given Sean, it was almost like throughout his entire title reign, it was like, let's give Sean O'Malley, time to grow and time to get better. It's all about, like, they truly believe in Sean O'Malley's skill set, but let's give him as much time as possible. Let's give him almost a year off to fight Aljo and prepare for Aljo. Then let's give him an easy title defense before he fights Merab. And then who knows what would happen if he beat Merab. But then we get into last night, UFC Noche, UFC 306 against Merab. And going into this fight, my prediction was I thought Sean O'Malley would keep the distance, use his lateral movement, and find counter shots and finish Merab. Because I'm looking at Merab, he's so sloppy on the feet. He's reactive to feints. Sean O'Malley's really good at feints. And even in my video, I talk about how, look, I'm not necessarily counting on the takedown defense of Sean O'Malley. I'm counting on the movement of Sean O'Malley and the countering ability, because Merab doesn't have the best striking. But Merab went out there, and to be honest, people call this fight a boring fight. It was far from boring. It was far from boring. And people just, they want WWE. Go watch kickboxing or WWE. It's never been more apparent to me how many casuals are in the sport now. And Dana White panders to him so much because they're just like, oh, yeah, I hope the new fans turned it off before the co-main and main. Is this MMA or is this kickboxing? And Merab is literally one of the most active guys in the cage. And if you're going to shit on Merab for being boring, then you better shit on Sean O'Malley for being boring as well, because dude was throwing like 5 strikes per round. Literally, he wasn't throwing anything. And why wasn't he throwing anything? Because he was scared of Merab's takedowns. So he was backing up, he was circling, he wasn't throwing anything, because when he did throw, especially kicks, Merab would catch him and then try to take him down. And O'Malley had some takedown attempts defended from Merab. He was able to defend some of them, especially on some of like the sloppier single legs off of like just a bum rush. But for the most part, Merab had his way with him. I mean, first round, when he closed the distance and got a hold of him, I think he like kicked his legs out from underneath of him and just mauled him to the ground. And it was like Merab wasn't even worried about him getting up, Like I talked about the Petr Yan fight against Sean O'Malley. Petr Yan didn't hold Sean O'Malley down because he wasn't prioritizing control time. Merab wasn't either. He was throwing good ground and pound shots. He was wearing on Sean O'Malley, but beating him up as well. And he did this for the first 4 rounds. The second round, he smashed him with elbows. 4th round, smashed him. He was landing some decent shots on the feet as well. And he had Sean O'Malley just frozen in front of him the entire fight. Did O'Malley land a couple shots? Sure. But Merab's movement and wrestling combination had Sean O'Malley frozen on the feet. And O'Malley, in my opinion, only won the 5th round. And I think you could make a case that Merab even won that round as well. But I lean O'Malley just because he did hurt him with the 1 teep kick. But now, you have the, benefit of hindsight, and you see Merab out grappling him with utter ease. And you look back at this resume and you realize the only real good win that Sean O'Malley has is against Aljamain Sterling. And when you really add context to it, Aljamain Sterling was set up for failure. The deck was stacked against him. And now you have Sean O'Malley in a spot where you have Merab at the top of the division. You have Umar waiting in the wings to fight Merab. You have guys like Henry Cejudo now calling him out, who has wrestling. And what's crazy is Henry Cejudo did better against Merab than Sean O'Malley did. He won a round. He clipped O'Malley. Marlon Moraes did better against Merab. And I know that's kind of a weird comparison because that was so long ago. But Sean O'Malley is going to have to work on his grappling and improve his grappling exponentially if he wants to beat a guy like Merab or Umar. I mean, the division is stacked. Bantamweight is an absolute shark tank. And he looked utterly defeated in this fight after the first round. In the second round, he was laying there and he was cheating. And he's a cheater too. He was grabbing the fence in the first round. He was grabbing in the gloves in the second round. The end of the second round, there was kind of a mess up by Herb Dean after Merab was kind of kissing the neck of Sean O'Malley. I joked around and said, he was giving him a hickey. And he jumps up, after Herb says, stop that. And Merab thinks it's the end of the round. O'Malley jumps up and tries to KO him, literally tried to KO him with Merab's back turn. Punched him in the back of the head, by the way. I didn't realize that in real time, but when I went back and watched it, punched him in the back of the head. Still couldn't get it done. So he cheated left and right. I know that isn't necessarily a cheat. He maybe just taking advantage of that. But then you have the first round where Tim Welsh is like screaming instructions to Merab and trying to talk shit to Merab and get Merab off his game. And I think he effed up because Merab went out there and used that as motivation. Merab was talking shit the entire fight. Merab was taunting. And I think Merab can be a fun champion, to be honest. I know he's kind of weird and stupid a little bit, but I mean, he's a guy that's going to go out there and dominate you. And, look what he did to Henry Cejudo. Picked him up, carried him over to Mark Zuckerberg, and shucked him on the ground, spine buster style. Look at the way he presses the action. And people could say, oh, I don't like the grappling. Well, it's MMA. It's mixed martial arts. It's MMA. And again, if you're going to say this fight's boring, then you better blame O'Malley. Even though Herb Dean's sitting there going, work, 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 which I swear on my life, Herb was told, let's give an advantage to Sean O'Malley. I'm surprised he didn't stand him up, but it's like Merab was doing good ground and pound and Herb's yelling work. Then Merab's up 4 rounds. He's now circling. Basically, the game plan's reversed because Merab won the first 4 rounds. First round, O'Malley's circling, and Merab's trying to track him down and trying to bum rush him. and they're not telling O'Malley to work. But then Merab in the 5th round is doing that because he's up 4 rounds, and Herb's like, work, work, and he's doing his silly little clap, work, work, work. It's just an absolute embarrassment. And he blamed Merab for the reason he got punched in the back of the head and sucker punched, essentially. But Herb says stop. And I know, someone corrected me and said, oh, he said stop that. When you're in the last 10 seconds of a round and you say stop, what do you think the fighter's going to hear? Imagine had Merab got sucker punched and KO'd, reminiscent of Jamal Hill and his brother at Thanksgiving dinner. Imagine had that had happened. That would have been one of the biggest controversies in the sport. But ultimately, Merab gets it done, and I think Sean O'Malley is going to have a tough path to get back to a UFC title. And I truly do believe, and I stand by, he was on the cusp of becoming a star for the UFC. Not a Conor McGregor level star, but a star nonetheless. Had he beat Merab and KO'd him at the Sphere, it would have been crazy. There would have been, so much social media attention. It would have elevated his name value and his star power significantly, pushing him towards an Umar Nurmagomedov fight or potentially an Ilia Topuria fight, which I believe is really what he would have campaigned for. But Merab goes out there and exposes him. And we should have known it. I mean, Petr Yan took him down with ease. And look what happened to Petr Yan against Merab. But I thought just Petr Yan striking overall is what set up the takedowns against O'Malley, which is true. But Merab was able to get it, and Merab's cardio is just unbelievable. And he's a monster. Merab's a monster. He's going to be tough to beat. And I'm super hyped for Merab versus Umar Nurmagomedov. I know Merab's like, oh, he didn't earn it. And, I know I've even said Merab is preemptively ducking Umar, which he definitely is. But I think it's more of Merab kind of being jealous of the situation that Umar's in, because Merab had to scratch and claw his way to a title shot. And Umar, didn't have to do that. A lot of guys ducked him. He got a big fight against Corey Sandhagen, dominated Corey Sandhagen, and now he's #1 contender. And also, I want to cover this. I covered this in my post-fight. What the UFC is already trying to do to Merab is scummy as hell. Like, they're immediately in the post-fight interview saying, oh, the next guy in line is Umar Nurmagomedov. They're showing him on the split screen. There's no doubt in my mind they already went backstage and offered Merab the Umar fight. Probably in 2 months. They probably offered him at Salt Lake City. They said, look, it's going to be a cardio advantage for you. Because they don't want Merab to have the title. It's never been more apparent. And this is maybe a topic for another video, that Dana White in the UFC wants to get a belt off Merab, because all they care about is pandering to casuals and, trying to make the company as profitable as possible, regardless if they're basically rigging fights. Now, that's a little bit of an exaggeration, but it's never been more apparent. Like, they're putting a split screen of Umar Nurmagomedov, up as soon as Merab is getting the belt wrapped around his waist. You think they would have ever done that to Sean O'Malley? Absolutely, positively not. And you know what's crazy? You guys need to give Merab respect. I was thinking about it today. Merab already has a GOAT bantamweight resume. You could make the case that right now Merab is the bantamweight GOAT. I know he just won the belt, but listen to his resume. He defeats Sean O'Malley, dominates him. Dominates Henry Cejudo, former champion. Dominates Petr Yan, former champion. Dominates Jose Aldo, former champion. Dominates Marlon Moraes. Well, not really dominates him, but does finish him. He did have some controversy or, had some adversity in the first round. But beats Marlon Moraes, former title challenger. Former, World Series of Fighting champion. And I know the resume prior to that isn't that great. But think about that. Marlon Moraes, Jose Aldo, Petr Yan, Henry Cejudo, Sean O'Malley. And then imagine he puts Umar Nurmagomedov on the resume. Merab is 1-2 fights away from bantamweight GOAT, and I'm not kidding. That's not being hyperbolic at all. So I don't think it's all lost for Sean O'Malley. To end this video, I don't think it's all lost for Sean O'Malley. I think he had some bright spots. The teep kicks he started to find in the 5th round. But, man, he looked defeated, and his corner advice was horrible. 4th round into the 5th round, Tim Welch is saying, and my voice is cracking because I lost my voice. I did 8 hours of streaming last night and then a bunch of videos afterwards. Tim Walsh is saying, it's almost over, Sean. It's almost over. I mean, Sean looked traumatized by Merab Dvalishvili from that grappling heavy, game plan. But ultimately, I think Sean can bounce back. But, man, it was his grappling exposed badly at UFC Noche. And it's going to be tough in that nasty, nasty bantamweight division. And by the way, Topuria would have absolutely killed him. I already thought that before the Merab fight, but I'm even more 100% confirmed that, Ilia Topuria would have absolutely smoked Sean O'Malley. And I think that's the fight he would have tried to gun for instead of Umar Nurmagomedov. Let me know what you guys think down in the comments. Don't forget to like the video. Don't forget to subscribe. And thank you so much for watching.